Okay, although I stand before you this afternoon as the representative of your regulator, I'm going to try and be less frightening than Ivor and try and explain in the ways in which the Commission is here to help trustees. I will use the word trustee, but interchangeably with either the formal role and legal liability of a trustee, but also not considering the executive leaders of charities as well. So what I want to do is set out some trends and themes for the charity sector that the Commission is observing and facing itself. I'll spend some time on safeguarding and fraud, you won't be surprised to hear, and look at the role of trustees in effective governance and where the Commission can help, as I say. And finally, I'll close by just describing some of the priorities for the Commission in future months and years to come. So the charity sector is a wonderful asset for the economic and social fabric of the United Kingdom. We are quite unique as a nation, and our charitable endeavour goes back further than most other countries, and therefore our good governance of our charity sector is looked at from across the world with some envy, and it must be cherished and nurtured. I'm not sure how many of you will realise this, but the charity sector in the UK is approximately 5% of gross domestic product. And when you think that the health sector is nearer 9 or 10%, that's really quite a surprising impact it has on the economy and therefore society. It's a big employer, and there are more than 500,000 individual trustees across England and Wales. Their Commission's role in regulating this sector is vital to protect public trust and confidence in charities and protect the integrity of charity as a function. The Commission is here to hold charities to account and to intervene robustly when things go wrong, and so that good charities, and all of you here today will be representing good charities, no doubt, because that's why you're here. You're taking a keen interest in governance and good reporting and so on. And that those trustees are getting the recognition that they deserve in the good work that's being done. And if you think about the span of control, it's a massively diverse sector you will all be involved in health and housing, environment, education, social care, etc. Some figures from the last year. The Charity Commission dealt with over 8,300 applications to become a charity, and that's up more than 40% over 5 years. And that demonstrates that charitable status is as attractive as ever. And we used our powers over 1,000 times, 80 of those related to the new powers given in the Charities Act, including the disqualification of trustees. And we deal with over 100,000 items of incoming communication each year from charities and the public. Most of those requests for support and advice. We consider in the Charity Commission that we can best fulfil our statutory objectives by concentrating on promoting compliance, ensuring charity trustees comply with their legal obligations, enhancing transparency, promoting the effective use of charitable resources, and ensuring that only bodies who properly qualify as charities in fact get registration. So protecting charities from abuse and mismanagement is one of the Charity Commission's key strategic priorities. Charities, the public wants more from charities. That's a theme that we see developing. Whilst perhaps 40% of the public think the level of regulation is about right, and there is a general perception that charities are well regulated, that perception is decreasing. I hope that some of you are aware that we run studies of public trust and confidence once every 2 years. And you can see that in 2016, it took a dip. In fact, that drop of 10 percentage points from, it's a mark out of 10, 6.7 dropping to 5.7. That is a material reduction in the public's trust and confidence in charities. Now, you can well imagine in 2016 why that might have occurred with well-publicized scandals and so on. We are analysing the results of the 2018 survey, which was conducted just before the Oxfam event, and that will be published next month. We are not expecting an uptick on that level of public trust and confidence. I don't suppose I need to say very much about this slide. What we are experiencing is changing public expectations of charity. There is an expectation of greater accountability, and we are seeing that the public is giving charities less benefit of the doubt. Now, in some ways, charities are experiencing what the rest of public life is experiencing. You can sense that that's probably happening to politics and institutions and major public companies, for example, as well. But charities are not immune from that expectation. The benefit of the doubt phrase is a very important one. I think that charities might expect and might have been given that in the past because of the very nature of charitable endeavour. That appears to becoming less of a benefit as time goes on. There is a growing expectation of higher moral and ethical standards, not just legal compliance. And even for the majority of charities that have not been implicated in public criticism, the relentless focus on the affairs of charities will have felt at least uncomfortable. And while this past year has felt particularly intense, we've seen a general increase in public and media scrutiny over prior years, not just in the last year. Specifically on safeguarding and the issues of the last few months, the majority of the staff of charities do life-saving and community-enhancing work. We all know that. Often, and more often than not, in difficult and dangerous situations. And that work must be allowed to continue. But exploitation and poor conduct has no place in charity. For the Commission, we've ramped up a series of initiatives and cross-sector task force to improve policies and guidance, a deep dive of our own data, including RSIs, which have, by the way, increased dramatically since the Oxfam incident. And we're reviewing the way we handle informants. I'll come back to that in a moment. But for charities, I ask you to examine whether you have your own house in order on safeguarding risks. How effective is your leadership, your oversight, your staff culture, your policies and processes? Trustees and leaders of charities must ask themselves, what urgent steps do I need to take to ensure that this is the case? Trustees should safeguard and promote the welfare of the charity's beneficiaries. Trustees should take reasonable steps to ensure that these beneficiaries or others who come into contact with their charity, could be volunteers, for example, do not, as a result, come to any harm or any risk of harm. Safeguarding goes beyond preventing physical abuse, includes protecting people from harm generally, such as neglect. And any failure of trustees to manage safeguarding risks adequately is a serious regulatory concern for the Commission. The Commission consider this to be misconduct and or mismanagement in the administration of a charity, and also maybe a breach of trustee duty. In the autumn of 2017, we upgraded our guidance on RSIs and the publicity to encourage charities and their staff to report serious incidents. That's led to an increase in reporting. That was prior to the Oxfam event. We believe there is still significant under-reporting, particularly with respect to internal fraud. The most common types of incidents reported, by the way, are safeguarding fraud, theft, financial loss, criminal breaches, and terrorism and extremism allegations, I should say. Let me move through that one and go to, by reporting a serious incident, you demonstrate you've identified a risk to the charity and that trustees are taking appropriate action to deal with it. That's important action that would play well when further incidents occur. So it's very, very important to report incidents. This serious incident reporting helps the Commission to gauge the volume and the nature of risks facing charities, and therefore the sector as a whole. That therefore means we can act in advance to improve guidance as a regulator and alerts to help other charities. So we really encouraging reporting. It is not something to shy away from. Just a moment on fraud and financial abuse. We've touched on it already, of course, so I won't spend too long on this, but it is the duty of trustees to ensure that the charity keeps sufficient accounting records and just show the charity's financial position. Some of our principal concerns in the Commission are that there could be a closed culture, and this is particularly a risk for smaller charities, a reluctance to speak up, to whistleblow. So therefore, scrutiny and strong financial controls and oversight are essential. One principal concern we have is around insider fraud, and we undertook an insider fraud themed review. Insiders being defined as trustees, staff, volunteers, and advisors, and put out a call for information in autumn 2017. That encouraged 50 responses, and the themes will be published soon, identifying common themes, highlighting good practice in charities, helping other charities to learn, as I said, and inputting to joint initiatives with the National Cyber Security Centre. Question. How many in the room are familiar with this document, the Essential Trustee? Excellent. That's a good proportion. It obviously should inform all that we do as trustees. Throughout the document, we hope to think it is accessible, and I would, by the way, welcome feedback on it and all of the other guidance that the Charity Commission puts out. There are links to more specialist guidance where it's needed, and there's a shorter version, CC3A, for the technically minded, just 6 pages, which introduces the key concepts. The root of good governance is, as a group of trustees acting together and in the best interests of their charity. I know from personal experience as a trustee of a small charity how difficult this is to achieve it. It is, in a small charity, typically quite a closed community, difficult to achieve diversity, and so on. Guidance is regularly updated, and we issue regulatory alerts. Twitter is one of our major methods of highlighting to trustees and others that new guidance is coming out. The examples are listed there. I won't talk through them in detail this afternoon. But we commissioned research on trusteeship published last year, and I thought the conference might be interested to spend a little time on this. Researchers looked at who trustees are and what they know about being trustees. And the research was eye-opening for us at the Commission, and I hope for the sector as a whole. In some respects, the research was extremely positive. Trustees are overwhelmingly positive about their role and the personal rewards they derive from trusteeship. Far from feeling overwhelmed or overworked, trustees see their roles as life-enhancing. They love what they do, a testament to the voluntary spirit. But there are also unsettling findings in the research. Trustees tend to recruit in their image, meaning that charities are often neither reflective of the communities they serve, nor are drawing on the diverse views as they make decisions. For example, 71% of charity chairs are men and 68% of charity treasurers are men. The average age of trustees is 55 to 64 years. Over half, more than half, are retired. Perhaps not surprising, some of these facts and figures. 71% of trustees are recruited through an informal process. In 80% of charities, trustees play both a governance role and an executive role, with potential conflicts of interest arising. And perhaps most important for us as a regulator, the research showed us that trustees are not accessing advice from and guidance from within the sector. Trustees look to one another. They look to one another first, and perhaps to the Commission second, for advice and guidance. So trustees need to manage the risk that your environment and your culture may allow poor behaviour to take place. You may be deliberately targeted, as Ivor has described, but not necessarily just by cybercrime and those not familiar with you. People in a position of trust abuse it and their privileges. And perhaps most significantly, there may be a failure for trustees to hold each other to account. The Commission would obviously not want trustees to rely on the regulator to be governance of last resort. The first point of call for good governance are the trustees themselves. A few words on the Commission's approach to risk-based regulation. It makes a lot of sense in the modern world to make the most of technology and get the data right and use that data effectively in targeting our limited resources and those of other agencies and regulators to those charities that are badly run. That then enables us to help charities to manage themselves more effectively and gives the public better access to the data that enables them to make informed decisions about the charity. So new forms of digital communication and technologically advanced techniques such as machine learning. The Charity Commission is investing in and investigating in order to improve our reach to charities, trustees, and members of the public. Some examples of risk-based proactive work include a charity sector counter-fraud group, timely and targeted alerts, as I mentioned, for example, on data protection and cash couriers, working with professional advisors to identify risk areas. We work, for example, with the major accounting and legal bodies to do just that. Fraud Awareness Week is another example, promoting our survey on insider fraud, as mentioned earlier, and noting that our guidance on CC8 internal financial controls will be reviewed in this year for developments in e-commerce and electronic payment technologies. So there's an awful lot happening, and we are trying to keep pace with the constantly changing risks that charities face. In February, we published an updated regulatory and risk framework. That's a refreshing rather than an overhaul of the previous version. And the amendments provide more clarity about when the Charity Commission will get involved, setting out our policies on awareness and prevention, oversight and supervision, and cooperation with other authorities. A quick mention of the annual return. You will no doubt be aware that we require an annual return from charities, and we consulted on a major overhaul for the 2018 financial year annual return. Some of the issues that were fed back through that consultation are listed out here. Our key concern as a regulator is to reduce the burden on smaller charities, whilst we ask larger and more complex charities for more sophisticated data and information to inform our risk-led approach. So you can expect to see more developments and more refinements to the annual return in coming years. And by the way, an enhanced digital online submission process later in 2018. And all of this is to improve the data we have available to us to support targeted regulation. So in summary, the Commission must regulate for the many good charities. Out of 167,000 charities, the overwhelming proportion are well-run and committed to good governance. We know that. And we know that all of you in this room are in that group. We recognise that trustees want to do what's right, as well as take robust action when things go wrong. And therefore, that underpins our increasingly risk-led approach. We want to be light touch with those who perform well and are committed to good governance, and we want to invest in digital services that enable you all to access our services and undertake the element of bureaucracy we enforce as smoothly and as easily as possible. We want to enhance our guidance, and we want to use technology to enable you to change as necessary, for example, providing authorizations to allow charities to adapt. And we want to be as accessible as possible, both directions. We would prefer to provide more advice to trustees routinely and be more accessible and responsive. We're not particularly well-resourced to do so, but we are endeavouring to do the best we possibly can with those limited resources. It's not always possible to be on the front foot at all times. They are interesting times. Societal change, increasingly rapid, technological change, Brexit, changing the landscape. It's essential that the sector and the Commission is able to keep pace with that change. In the near future, a few things to look out for. We hope and intend to launch consultation later in 2018 to seek views on raising funds directly from charities, so part funding the Commission directly from charities. We will be proposing that we raise funds only from the very largest charities, potentially from only a few thousand out of the very largest charities out of the 167,000. But we really require the views of the sector, individual charities, on the practicalities and implication of that proposal. We will be launching a trustee welcome pack for all newly appointed trustees and endeavouring to make that as digital and as accessible as possible. And launching a consultation, or recently launched a consultation, on draft guidance on the principles of managing relationships with organisations that are not charities, for example, trading subsidiaries that we touched on earlier, and non-incorporated charities or non-registered social enterprises. And the Charity Commission has a new chair. Baroness Stoll, appointed in February, has launched a review of our strategic plan, taking us through to 2023, a 5-year forward view. That work is well underway, and we'll be launching that in the, hopefully, early autumn. The tone of it so far, just an early view of where we're thinking is going, is that the Commission, be more of an emphasis on the Commission serving the public, an emphasis on our interaction with the public and ensuring that the Commission, as regulator of the charity sector, is there to serve the public and ensure that it can have the maximum public trust and confidence in charities and the charity sector. And that's all from me. Thank you.